you, Mitchell. So we have lots of time for questions, so let's get into it. Questions? I've got two to start with.
Please.
Subtle messages in ads matter. That's what I gathered from your example there. But why, in your example, did the word okay perform better than the word preview?
Yeah, that's a great question. The question was, why did the word okay work better than the word preview? And this is the answer. The answer is, I don't know. And the answer is, I will never know. And by the way, I'm not trying to be flip with you. In fact, this was one of the founding principles of our company and the technology that we built, for example, was based on the premise that arguments and discussions in the world of marketing that are somehow fundamentally about how people will react to things are silly. Because we can't predict how people are going to react to things, and the punchline is, you've got to test. And you've got to just try things. So the moral of that story for me is, and my answer to you is that the non-flip answer is, because you can't know, make it easy to test. Make it easy to try things. When somebody has a thought of, should the button say, click, or click here, or click now, or next, or preview, or okay, you as a company have a choice. You can either make that question okay to ask and easy to answer, or you can make that question a distraction and a headache.
Is it not worth knowing?
It is well worth knowing. I mean, we've just underscored it, right? So the example that I shared with you, the difference between the word okay and preview was 58%. Now, name other things where with a really modest amount of effort, you can do to change the economics of part of your business by 58%. That easily. There just aren't many. It's worth making it easy to test, and then fostering a culture where it's expected to test. Don't argue, test. And the reason people don't do it today is because it's too hard, because some combination of culture and workflow has made it either unacceptable, not encouraged, or too difficult to actually go exercise and run these tests. But you can affect that.
This is probably another question you can't exactly answer, but in general, like, what do you see has the biggest effect in terms of like message, like, you know, I guess copy, or imagery, you know, color? Is they all, you know?
Does it just depend on the ad, basically?
So the question was, in general, what do we see that works well in ads? And what
Or not necessarily that works well, but that has the most like variance. So for example, like okay preview, those are words you can change.
Sure.
You know, where you get 50% difference. But like if you change the color of the character's hat or something, you know, would
Sure.
that make a big difference?
Yeah, and so the answer is, I can't answer it exactly, but I will give you two answers to that. The first is, just generally speaking, there are some things we can say that are predictable about how people click on ads and why they click on ads. In fact, I haven't written this down, but I've thought about it a bunch. The anatomy of a click. And here are some facts. People say, oh, you can't know what's going to drive a click. I think we can know a few things. I think we can say that the anatomy of a click requires passing 3 or 4 tests. First is the glance test. If a consumer never glances at the ad, you're not going to get a click. It's just not going to happen. And we have to remember, an ad is different than a game. So the game is the centerpiece. This is an engaged user. When you're creating ads, you have to have a whole different attitude. Ads are a distraction. Most of them are ignored. So part of the work you have to do is to pass the glance test. What's a glance? Here's a glance. Right? Just a glance. It's a millisecond. If you can't do something with your ad to get a glance, you're not going to get a click. Once you've earned a glance, test 2 in the anatomy of a click is the dwell test. If you don't get a dwell, you will not get a click. What's a dwell? A dwell is when somebody glances at your ad, there has to be, they kind of stick with it. They can't just go like this, glance away. The dwell is spending maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds of asking the question in the consumer's mind, what is this and do I care? And by the way, I'll give you a couple examples of how to pass the dwell, we find with the glance test, the dwell test. One example is animation, helps get a glance. A dwell, quite often strangeness, you find will get a dwell. Right? So you glance at things all the time, but when you see things that are counterintuitive, that's when you do a dwell. So for example, if I could get a glance by clapping or something distracting you or whatever. I could get a dwell if I had a way to make this water suddenly start shaking all by itself and then levitate up in the air. You bet every single one of you would suddenly be like, what's this? You would spend 2 to 4 seconds asking, what's this? That's a dwell. So pass the glance test, pass the dwell test, and then the third test is comprehend A and comprehend B. You have to now understand, the consumer has to understand what it is that you're presenting, and do they want to learn more? And so this is where you have a call to action, and so forth. So it's real great that I can get you to glance, and it's real great that I can use marketing wizardry to get you to dwell and say, what is this? But now I have 4 seconds or 3 seconds of a dwell to communicate what is it that I'm saying and why you want to learn more. So I mean, these are rules of thumb to think about when you look at an ad. If it's not something that people are going to glance at, it could be the greatest ad in the world, nobody's going to glance at it. If it doesn't achieve a dwell, nobody's going to open their brain and ask, what is this, do I want to learn more? And finally, if they can't comprehend what this is and actually communicate why you might want to learn more, in less than 2 or 3 seconds, you're not going to get a click. The overwhelming punchline here is, as people who produce products for a living, you have to put on a different hat when you think about ads. Products, by definition, are things that consumers have already chosen to engage with. You have their focus. Ads, by definition, are distractions that most people don't even want to see anyway, so you have to earn 2 or 3 seconds of their attention, and then you have to use that 2 or 3 seconds to communicate, what are we talking about here, and why might you want to learn more about it?
So the click results after passing all 3 tests and comprehend B.
Yep.
And if you're lucky, then you get the click.
Then you get a click. But as for the specific treatments, I just can't urge you enough to try things. But these are ways to think about it.
More questions? Come on, this is gold up here.
That's my follow-up.
Yeah, please.
So one of the things I've been thinking about is that you can generate a click. For example, with men, you put a picture of a pretty girl, and you can generate clicks. But how do you close the loop between the quality of the person who clicks? So you're optimizing for CTR or something like that. But then you might what you want is a user who you're going to retain, who's going to spend money. So can you talk just a little bit about sort of closing that loop?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the question was, in case people didn't hear, it's pretty obvious how you might get a higher click rate, but a lot of times you end up with lower value clicks. And so what do you do to close the loop and make sure that you're taking it all into account? The short answer is you don't optimize to click-through rate. You optimize to, first, net yield, which is click-through rate times conversion rate. And so, to your point, there are some very good examples where lower click-through rates have a higher conversion rate, and when you multiply the math out, you're getting more installs, for example, per 1,000 impressions. And vice versa, by the way. So there are some ads where you get a much higher click rate and a much lower conversion rate, where the net yield, in fact, is higher. And so there are cases where you have ads that don't talk about the product a whole lot, but net comes out ahead. But then, secondarily, you want to take the second step, where you're not just looking at net install yield per 1,000 impressions, but you want to close the complete loop to revenue per 1,000 impressions. So if you can get your organization mature enough to a place where you can actually attribute user revenue back to the impressions you bought, that's where you optimize to. It's RPM, revenue per 1,000 impressions. And then you're comparing CPM to RPM, right? But that's even more difficult. The part that we can all do is we can optimize to net yield, meaning click-through rate times conversion rate, as opposed to optimizing to click rate.
Thank you so much, Mitchell. We have run out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.